Hey there, listeners. Welcome back to the All Things Geekery Podcast, where we explore the realms of geeky hobbies like gaming, tech, science fiction, and all that randomness in between. I'm your host, Iogro, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to start doing some shorter episodes, about that 15 to 30 minute time frame. So over the next few months, we're going to do some different things with the podcast. I've been talking with both of my co-hosts, and we've got a cool little segment planned over the next few months. Some film and TV reviews about some of the Netflix originals that are coming out, and even some of the new movies and TV shows that are being released. But we're also going to be doing some lore series on one of my favorite games, which is Destiny. So, buckle up and get excited because I know we are on that side. I'm looking forward to creating that content, and I'm looking forward to sitting down with you for just a few minutes on this show. And let's get this show started, guys. Welcome back to episode 4. Today is something very cool. I don't know if you guys have Netflix. If you don't, you should. It's a fantastic streaming service, but we're not talking about Netflix today. We're talking about a Netflix original that just came out. It was released this month, and it is something that was a flashback to my childhood for me. It's called Stranger Things. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend this show. If you grew up in the 80s or were a fan of any of the 80s films that came out, whether it be the action, the horror, the suspense, thrillers, any of that stuff, growing up in the 80s, I couldn't have asked for a better childhood. You remember the days of riding your bikes together with your friends when it was nighttime outside? Yeah, I do. It's changed. You just don't see that anymore. But this show brought back some of those childhood memories, and it was a lot of fun to sit down and actually enjoy and watch. It's something that both my wife and I, we grew up in the 80s. We had that kind of childhood. So again, this show is set in the early 80s, around 82 to 83. And it has those 80s influences. And it was a nostalgic throwback to the good old days. What is this show all about? Why was it so good? Why was it a fantastic watch? Like I said, it was because for me personally, I grew up in the 80s. So I grew up in the time where John Carpenter, Stephen King, Steven Spielberg, all the old classic directors were on the top of their game, and they were making their way. They were making the headway of films and TV. So the series of this show, it centers around a mysterious disappearance of a young boy. His name is Will. There might be just a couple of spoilers in here, so if you haven't watched the show, I'm going to try my best not to spoil anything at all for you. But this disappearance of this young boy named Will, he is one of the main characters of the show, but you don't get to see him very often. The cool thing about this show is you had a disappearance of Will, and you had a finding of a young girl. Only to the group watchers and even the people in the show, they only knew her as 11. She is a very strange addition to this show, but she was also a very key part to this show. The overall feel of the series and the characters, it had that horror and suspense that a lot of the 80s movies did. It also had a lot of the throwback clothing and the cars. Like I said, I think this was filmed in kind of the era of about a 1982 to 1983. We've got Will, we've got 11, and there are 4 boys that are best friends. They grew up together. They're about 11 to 12 years old, and Will is one of those friends, and he goes missing. Now, the other 3, they decide they're going to go on this wild fantasy mission and go and search for him. So Will's friends, they're not just the only ones looking for him. Will's mom, who is Winona Ryder. Now, I'm not a huge Winona Ryder fan, but I have to give it to her. She did a fantastic job in this show. she brought a very traumatized single mother, very out of her mind because she has just lost her son. She has end of her wits. She doesn't know what to do, and she plays a very good part for this show. Now, the town that they're in is a very small town up in Illinois, and this town has potentially been hiding a very dark secret for a long time. And that's where the suspense of this show really comes in. So as soon as you get to sit down and actually press play on Stranger Things, it just sucks you right into the storyline, the nostalgia of the 80s. It drops you into a very familiar place if you grew up in that time frame. The creators of the show, Matt and Ross Duffer, bring that 80s influence to this show brilliantly and bring us something that we probably haven't seen in a very long time. The originality of this show was spot on. It was fantastic. And the depiction of these young kids and the way they speak, the way they interacted, and yeah, they did. They got to ride their bikes and play outside, and you see all these things that you don't really get to see in this generation. Honestly, it felt like an old Spielberg movie. There's a little bit of an E.T. feel to the adventure scenes of this show, and a little bit of the Goonies, if you remember that. And it has that Spielberg-esque moment to it. And Stranger Things didn't just bring an influence of the 80s like the Spielberg moments, but it brought a much larger cast of some of our favorite childhood influences back then. The cool thing about the show was the opening credits and the music and just the overall vibe of the show. A little bit of John Carpenter, I think, was pulled from that influence, and just the mashup of the intense, suspenseful music and the opening scenes, which brings a scariness to the show in a way. This show brings the horror fans of us out, as we do get to see some gore and very intense, scary moments for one unfortunate soul in the opening of this show. But I think the overall feel, the Duffer Brothers have said that Stephen King and Carpenter and Spielberg were a huge influence in their childhood and their growing up, and they worked on stop motion films, so you can really feel the influence of those directors in the show. That's not what makes it good, though. Like I said, the originality of what these brothers did to this show is what made it so good. What I liked best about the show is it wasn't just a copy of some famous 80s scriptwriter and director, as the show creates a very intriguing and eye-catching world of its own. The thing was well written, it was thought out, and the show is centered around this great group of likable characters, which is part of how well the kids themselves, these four friends, interact and work as a group together. The Duffer Brothers did a spot-on fantastic job of finding a cast who wasn't a polished set of actors. They were rough around the edges, but they brought a realness to the show, which helps draw the audience even closer. I mean, it sucked my wife and I right into the show, and we binge watched the thing, and it's one that we would come back over and over and over and watch. So we're talking about the great 80s, right? And you can't really do that without bringing the teen drama into a show like this. So the four brothers, Will, and the rest of this group, there is one who's kind of the ringleader of the group, and he had an older sister named Nancy. Nancy's your typical teenager growing up in the 80s, very rebellious against mom and dad, very outspoken in the way she wants to live her life, doesn't need mom and dad there. So it plays right into the way the 80s really felt back then. Again, Winona Ryder plays that single mom who, over that 8-episode season that we get to see, grows worrisome that her son is lost. She becomes estranged at times. She became very volatile with her emotions. And of course, that's understandable. She just lost her kid. Her kid is missing. One of my favorite roles in this show was from an actor named David Harbour. He plays the local, arrogant, tough guy police chief. Overall, he's just a very complex character. He brought a lot of acting skill to the show, and a lot of the moments where you see him arrogant, he has just as many moments where he is kind and very supportive to the mom and these 4 boys, and helping this whole story just move right along. Now, I do have to say, if the show had one area that I could really ding it on and say it was lacking, I would say, from a story standpoint, the only minus I would give the show was it had so many mysteries that unfolded in this one season that we got to see. It kept you on the edge most of the show, but what I really wished was it felt more formed, because these mysteries, they left you from a storyline that they didn't really connect all those mysteries together. They kind of left you standing. That was really my only ding on this show. Now, I'm not a director. I've never made movies, but that could be their whole purpose of this show. They could just be leaving you these little breadcrumbs and asking you to make up your own opinion on the show. What do you think's going to happen? The overall plot, it came from all sorts of angles. It kept you guessing at all the time of what was coming next. It was just like a good horror suspense film back in the 80s. And some of those things, like that we got to see in those 80s films, were government and scientific conspiracies, the growth of the relationships that these boys had as friends, to their parents and how they interacted with one another, the rebellion, the drinking, the drugs. There was a lot of stuff in this show. Now, overall, if Netflix decides to pick them up for a season 2, I think from some of the forums and things that I've read, the Duffer Brothers, they already have an idea of where this show's supposed to go. And I will say the ending of season 1 was a massive, massive enjoyment to watch. They did a great job with it. They didn't leave you with so many questions that it made the show unenjoyable to finish. But like I said, there were a lot of mysteries and a lot of things that unfolded very quickly with some of the characters and some of the conspiracies that just gave you a question of where are they really going and what are they going to be doing with this show. So, guys, overall, like I said, we're going to cut these episodes down a few minutes and make these a little bit shorter. I do have to say, the Stranger Things show, it's one of my top list shows right now. Overall, it gets an A+ in my book. It was a great 80s set for a couple of directors that brought a lot of joy and a lot of excitement for this show. I think the Duffer Brothers did an amazing job combining all of the different tones and genres together to make us feel that we were being pulled back into our childhood if you grew up in that time era. The show goes from moments of questionable actions to moments of absolute terror, and all of that was set in a very curious little group, a bunch of kids, and it does it without making you feel like it's a knockoff 80s horror film. And that's where I gave it so many props. So guys, if you haven't checked this show out, go check it out. I would love to know what your thoughts are once you finish watching the show. Give me some comments. Those are the things that we really need for this show. I thank you so much for listening. Go check us out at our website. It's www.allthingsgeekery.com. Go check out some of our content. You can find us out on YouTube, iTunes. You can find us on Google Music. So guys, look us up sometime. We would love to hear your comments. We would love to hear your feedback. Until next time, I'm your host, Iogro, and we'll see you in the next episode.